as we come and go, and we thank you for getting us to our family destinations and back again safely this past Thanksgiving season. We ask, Father, that you continue to protect us as we continue ourselves for the continuing of this season, such as it is, and we thank you so much for the protections that you offer us. We thank you for the skill that you place in the hands of the medical personnel who are working with us to keep us healthy. And we know that there are many who are suffering from advancing age to which have to be done. And of course, our thoughts and prayers go with Keith as he prepares for his upcoming procedure as well. And to recovery from surgeries and also cancer treatment. And we ask, Father, that you be with those who are suffering from cancer treatment. And we thank you for that have been successful so far. And of course, there are those who are less successful, Father. And we ask that you be with those who are dealing with the closing chapter in their life on this earth, and those who are around them. And we ask that you strengthen us all. And we thank you for the gospel to come to you through your gospel, to respond for that so many of our loved ones who are facing this situation are firmly in your loving embrace, have answered the gospel and can look an eternity in heaven with you, and we look forward always with that reunion in heaven in mind. And we ask, Father, that you continue to guide us and strengthen us in that endeavor. We offer this prayer in the name of your most precious and holy Son. Amen. I have Daniel. We're in Daniel 11. We in about verse 19, 20, verse 20. Okay. There are, and I note something here, and we'll probably get down to the end of this. You note how in Genesis 1, overview of the creation, and then you jump into Genesis 2, and you get that honing in on a specific area, a specific time period. We see that happening in a number of places where you'll get a broad overview, and then there will be a point where divine wisdom and divine inspiration will focus in on the period for one reason or another. Do we know God's reasons for that? Unless God tells us, we don't, but we have to trust that God has anything that he exposes us to and in his providential care of mankind. And so we see that Daniel has I've lost my page. So we see that he has honed in here. He starts in chapter 11 and he gives you a broad overview, and then he goes back and he narrows it down as he gets toward the end of the chapter, and we're going to see that as well. And I note that there are Greek and Roman historians and many who are renowned in secular history who have applied descriptions which seem to point to them in some. We actually, through this prophecy, can go back and with reasonable degree of certainty attribute these characteristics to one, should say many particular characters in the history of Greece and Rome as we go through here. So we looked at the king of the north, and we looked at we talked laying siege to Jerusalem. We looked at Antiochus, who waged a war against the Ptolemies of the south. Antiochus was one of the great Seleucid kings. Two of the dynasties, the Seleucid dynasty in the north and the Ptolemaic dynasty in the south of was a part, would do battle, and Palestine was one of their walking that and so there are certain areas throughout, for some reason, contested, or places where they met, and that area in Palestine, and in particular the plains of Esdraelon, has been one of those. And as far as Eastern Europe and Western Europe are concerned, that area in the vicinity of the country of Romania been one that was considered to be the doormat of the Eastern and Western European nations. And so we see that there's a battle going on, and we looked at the Palestine, what's going on in Palestine, and then Antiochus looking to consolidate his kingdom, but then being resisted by and then at turning his face on well. And so what eventually happened is Antiochus overextended himself, and he had to withdraw back in the kingdom. Okay, and it's what is referred to in verse 19 of Daniel 11 as the stumbling, and so he basically his empire more or less dissolved. It fell of its own weight. Well, we know the Roman Empire did that too. It collapsed of its own weight. We see that a number of empires in the past and even in the future will collapse of their own weight, because they get themselves overextended, or they get too short-sighted in their planning. And so we are now talking about, and we'll get to verse 20. It's interesting that we talk about someone who was referred to as a raiser of taxes. So let's take a look at verse 20. Read verse 20 and verse 21, please.
Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle.
Yeah. Okay, keep going.
And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom. But he shall come in peaceable, and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. And with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant.
Also the prince of the covenant. Keep going, verse 23.
And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people.
Okay, but he, and that should be probably a but he, and that should actually perhaps be capitalized there in verse 23. So I'm going to back up, and this raiser of taxes in glory of the kingdom has been attributed in the historical progression of these kings and rulers to be one called Heliodorus, who was a local governor on behalf of Seleucus the Fourth, one of the Seleucid kings, who was a precursor or a forerunner of Antiochus the Fourth, Antiochus Epiphanes, or Epimanes, as the Jews called him, because he thought he was all knowing and they thought he was out of his mind. But his Seleucus the Fourth, his other name was Philopator or Philopater. Okay. And he overtaxed, but instead of being defeated in battle, he says neither in anger nor in battle. Well, in fact, Philopater was poisoned by one of his generals. Okay, he died of poisoning, and Antiochus the Fourth inherited this kingdom. And he was a little more devious. He flattered a lot of people. He played politics a lot. He would take people and put them in power to gain political fame. All right. Well, that's not out of the unusual, the norm. But he actually went so far as to form a league with the high priest in that time. And so you see in verse 22 the reference to the prince of the covenant. the prince of the covenant would be the high priest who basically formed a league, if you will, with Antiochus the fourth, uh, and actually permitted Antiochus to go in and literally take over the temple. Okay, Antiochus, if you recall me mentioning, was one who actually went out and defiled the temple by sacrificing pigs on the altar. Okay, and it caused a lot of hate and discontent. But that league did that did its work to pervert and to pollute the Jewish religion at that time. But then, of course, there's a reference to Christ who would come back and work with the people, become strong with a small people. Remember that this is a small beginning. We're told not to despise small beginnings because we started small. And we started with 3,000, and then it grew and grew and grew, and by the end of the first century, Roman governments and other governments alike were coming to the realization that the only way to beat Christianity was to join Christianity, was to incorporate it into their government. Since we have the Holy Roman Empire, and we have the league with the Church of Rome, and the political advantage that the Church of Rome exploited to the point of literally overthrowing governments, and sending many people to their deaths for reasons that really had little to do with God and a great deal to do with mammon. Okay? All right, so we're looking at Antiochus, and verse 24. We'll talk about plundering the temple and following on. So read verse 24, please, and keep going.
He shall enter peaceable, even upon the fattest places of the province. He shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey and the spoil and riches. Yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. Yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain.
So we're talking about a conflict here going on between the Seleucid king Antiochus IV and the Ptolemean king, and all the Ptolemies, but in particular Philometor, who is Ptolemy the Sixth. Okay, who was moved because he saw the power, he saw the ability to deceive and to form these alliances with Antiochus. He was not necessarily a great military leader, but he was able to put together enough alliances that they were able to, in this particular case, stand against the Ptolemies, and the Ptolemies were unsuccessful in their ability to resist him. But Antiochus got so full of himself that he decided that he was a god, and that he could supplant God in the temple of the Jews. All right, and so both of these kings. Oh yeah, did we do verse 26 yet?
Yes.
We did, right? Philometor was betrayed by people who had formed an alliance. He was betrayed by spies, if you will. Okay, and so he died, basically died in battle, because he was betrayed by some who had been basically paid, if you will, to form an alliance and to get him out of the way. All right, and then verse 27 and follow.
And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper. For yet The end shall be at the time appointed. Then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant. And he shall do exploits and return to his own land.
Yeah, so here we are, Antiochus. We're talking about those things which he did to defile the temple. But then eventually there was enough pressure. Once again, we see that his kingdom suffered and was being nibbled around the edges. And so he literally had to withdraw his forces to Syria, outside of Palestine, because of the rebels that were rising up against him. And as I indicated before, the books of the Apocrypha contain some of the exploits, and they're not historically, they are not divinely inspired, nor are they, in fact, in many cases, anything other than great exaggerations. But nevertheless, the exploits of the rebels against the Greeks, and then actually against the Romans later on, are noted there. Okay, and verse 29 and following.
At the time appointed he shall return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former, or as the latter. For the ships of Chittim shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant.
Okay, so now he's talking about having intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. He's talking about banding with the Jewish Hellenists. Now, when we hear about the Hellenists in this case, we're talking about Jews who are aligned with the Greeks. Of course, Antiochus was Greek. Okay, but here is where you see the government of Rome starting to come into the picture, because this verse 29, coming toward the south and not as the former or as the latter, we're starting to see a reference to the Roman commander Livy, and the battles, the sea battles, which are being waged here. The ships of Chittim, we're talking about the Roman navy. We're talking about an expeditionary force that shall come against him, and therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. And so, in an effort to try to forestall the advance of the Roman navy, he formed a league with certain of the Jews who thought that they might be able to cement their political position by taking advantage of his needs. All right, didn't work. But verse 31 and following, please.
And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. And such as do quickly against the covenant shall be corrupt by flatteries. But the people that they do know their God shall be strong and do exploits.
Yeah, now I talked about the resistance movement against the Greeks. And so whenever he defiled the temple, well, those who were still being faithful, among them Judas Maccabeus, and if you look at the Maccabees, which is one of the books of the Apocrypha, you will see the exploits of the Maccabees, those who followed Judas Maccabeus, as they resisted first the Greeks and then the Romans. Okay, all right, keep going.
And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword and by the flame, by captivity and by spoil many days. Now when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them and to purge and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed.
So it's talking about the resistance of those who are still true followers of God, and their ability to continue to resist the onslaught of the heathens, if you will, first the Greeks and then the Romans. And then we get to a description. It jumps back into a description. We've heard his name thrown out here a couple of times, or references to him. And now we go back to a more detailed description. As I indicated before, you look at the first part of Exodus, the opening part of Exodus, you get a broad brushstroke, and then you get that honed back in with a little bit more precision on the God's interaction with Adam, God's creation of an interaction with Adam and Eve. And so now we're kind of going to focus a little bit more here on one man, Antiochus IV, Antiochus Epiphanes, okay, a very vile man, and we're going to get a description and a treatment of him, and this is prophecy. Remember, okay, this is Daniel looking forward into the future as to what's going to happen here, and of course he prayed for an answer. He prayed for. Remember it again, once again, in Matthew 24. Remember they asked him how are they going to know about the end of the earth, and their question was twofold, and Jesus answered them in a twofold fashion. Well, once again, Daniel prayed for clues as to what was going to happen to the people in captivity. Okay, and it's interesting to note here that God gave him an answer, which was also a two-part answer, because there was more than just the Jews themselves in captivity at this particular time. And so he looks at the repatriation, he looks at the removal from captivity from Babylon, but he also looks ahead to the removal of man from the captivity of the wages of sin through the effects of the Christian era. And so there's two questions being answered here as well. So let's take a look at what has to be said, what is being said here about Antiochus IV.
Ted,
Keep going, please.
Ted, that verse 35, there's an unusual remark. Try to purge and to make them white.
Make them white. Some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, to purge, and to make them white, even to the time of the end, and to make them white even into the time of the end. And so, what do we know about patience, about faith? Okay, the trying of our patience brings faith, it brings endurance. Okay, brings what is it called? Patience. The trying of our faith brings patience. And so these people who are resisting on behalf of God, and the trials which are besetting them will prove them to be worthy of God's respect and recognition. So making them white means that they are going to be prepared to stand in white robes. Remember, we will talk about that as we continue on in Revelation. Those who are under the altar, or those who are dressed in white robes. And so it's a reference to the purification through resistance of evil and consistent resistance of evil. So that making them white means justifying them before God.
Okay, I just never heard that. I've never made that,
white.
seen that statement.
Of course you have. What did Isaiah say? Come, let us reason together. Though thy sins be as scarlet, they shall be
as white as snow.
There you go. Okay. All right. Had another question.
You answered my question. I also thought making them white would be without sin.
There's no such thing as without sin.
Yeah,
but justified before God, yes.
Yes.
So, all right.
And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done.
Yeah, I would have said that which is determined, but you know, you got to trust those Middle English translators of the King James version. They put some sentences together in some pretty interesting ways. But yeah, okay. And so this is Antiochus, who is such a, he is so irreverent that not only does he recognize God, but he also recognizes, but he failed to recognize God, but he also fails to recognize his own Greek gods, and he basically makes himself a god, all right, as such. Whenever they were worshiping in the temple, those sacrifices were being sacrificed to him himself. So he put himself there. That is not the first time that might have been. That is not the last time that will happen. Let's call it that. Okay. So keep going.
Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew shall not be honored with gold and silver,